I'm Charlotte. You're watching The Ugly Atheist. An old friend of mine suggested I do an episode on the seven Noahide laws, Noahide laws, or Noachian laws, however you'd like to pronounce it. And these are the laws that were given in its written form in the Talmud from the probably about 100 AD, I guess, or CE. Um, and they are meant to be a set of rules specifically for Gentiles, for non-Jews. And it turns out that the Ten Commandments were specifically only for Jews. And I had thought that the Ten Commandments were for all people. Um, In fact, I did a series on the Ten Commandments a little while ago. I think most of that was posted on Rumble. I don't know if it's there anymore. I think one episode is here on YouTube, but I approached that study, or that outline review rather, of the Ten Commandments from the perspective that they were useful for all mankind and not just ancient Hebrews. Um, And for the most part, that was the case. There were only a couple of commandments that were just strangely specific and not relevant um, to humanity as a whole. Um, so I wanted to approach these seven Noahide laws in a similar perspective, and it turns out these actually were meant for all humankind. At least that's what the folklore indicates. They're not really mentioned in the Torah, and not mentioned in any part of the Old Testament and the Christian tradition, except for in Genesis 9:4 through 6. I guess there was mention of a brief mention of how humans are to behave, how humans are to behave, because at that time of at the time of Noah, Moses hadn't come down from Mount Sinai to deliver the Ten Commandments that would come later in history, according to the mythology, anyway. And just real quick to get it out of the way, we know that Noah, the story of Noah, is just a mythology. There was not a worldwide flood, and there's no way the diversity of animal life and humanity could reach its current state in the short amount of span that um, Noah, the Noah's account happened. Was that 3,000, 5,000 years ago? There's no way that the diversity of life and the location of life on Earth could have reached the degree that it has in that short of a time span. Um, And we also don't see any evidence of a worldwide flood. We see evidences of local floods, but all of that is irrelevant to today's episode. We're going to approach this more on a philosophical, from a more philosophical perspective and not a literal perspective. So we're going to look at the seven laws and and take them at face value as coming from the perspective of knowing nothing about Hebrew culture or anything about the Hebrews. We're going to see if these truly are universal to humanity as a whole. And let's get right into this. I also wanted to say one thing real quick before we dive into this. This was written by some pretty hardcore um, Hebrews back in the days of the Sanhedrin, I guess. And this is true with a lot of religions, I guess, where the closer you get into the core of the fundamentalism, like the most the purists of the religion, they tend to be more exclusionary, where they're not welcome to outsiders. They're not. looking for converts necessarily. And I think that's the case with the Jews. The closer you get into the fundamentalism of Judaism, you will find people who want to keep Judaism for the Jews only, and they're kind of not in favor of Gentiles or outsiders joining the church. And so it was believed that these Noahide laws were created to say, okay, 10 commandments are for the Jews only. Don't mess with them. Don't come here. This is our rules. And here's some crumbs for you. Here's your commandments for you Gentiles. Go and do this thing and consider yourselves holy. Good day. I said good day. But that aside, um, I still think, despite all of that, these laws are still useful and still beneficial to follow as a whole for all of humanity, but we'll get into it and see. We have number one is don't worship idols. Um, so, is this law um, beneficial to humans in general? I think, in one sense, it is. Well, let me describe the sense in which it's not, because not everybody believes in the same gods, or not everybody believes in gods in general. So, from a religious perspective, this is not useful for people. But I think um, what it could also mean, in a more secular sense, is that if you have a set of ideals that you were raised with, things that you valued, behaviors and um, ideals that are something that you strive for, and an idol would be something that gets in the way of that. So if you strongly believe that, let's say you strongly believe in honesty, but then an opportunity comes up where it's not exactly honest, but it's sort of maybe skirting the edge or a little bit kind of questionable, and you're tempted to take advantage of that opportunity because of some short-term monetary gain or something that would benefit your loved ones or your family or yourself. I To me, that would be considered an idol. Anything that gets in the way of your core set of beliefs and what you know to be good in your own life. And like, if you have a goal to you want to reach a certain financial goal, like in my case, I'm on the market to buy a house. I want to buy an investment property, but certain things tend to get in the way, like other temptations, like, oh, I want to get one of these things. Oh, I want to get one of those. Oh, I need one of these. And little by little, those little things can delay or even um, thwart my goal of that particular goal. And so, in that instance, those little things would be idols. I'm putting those ahead of what I know to be the right path. So, with a little bit of reinterpreting, I think um, this first law is applicable to all mankind. So, that takes us to the second law. It says, don't curse God. Uh, don't curse God. And in a literal sense, at face value, this does not hold a lot of weight for humanity as a whole. But if you take it as a more symbolic gesture, if you define God as, again, that which is morally beneficial or behaviorally beneficial to your family, to yourself, um, something I would even align it more with the idea of tradition. Like, if your family has a tradition and something that might seem silly, but it's something that your family does and something that they value, something that kind of defines your family. What this commandment, or this law rather, is prescribing is to not profane that which is sacred to your family or even to your community. If your community holds a certain festival or celebration every year, or has other traditions, um, and you come out and ridicule it, or downplay it, or just outright call it ridiculous, or refuse to participate, I would think that would qualify as cursing God. You're making light of something that your community and your family holds with a great degree of import. And if it's interpreted in that sense, then I think this second law does have a lot of value to humanity. So moving on to the third law, the Noahian law, we have don't commit murder. Now, this one's a no-brainer. This is one that we can all get behind, generally speaking. I think this is similar to one of the commandments about committing murder, and I know I went over that on one of my previous videos as I worked through the Ten Commandments, or reviewed the Ten Commandments. And I don't remember what it was I said at that time, but I think this was one of the ones that was pretty straightforward. Um, so, with that being said, I'll move on to number 4. It says, don't commit adultery or sexual immorality. Yeah, actually, 4 and 5, 3, 4, and 5 seem to be no brainers. Don't commit murder, don't commit adultery or sexual immorality, and don't steal. Um, I think the wording for problem 4, the wording for law number 4 is a little ambiguous, but I think if you read it with common sense, then it's pretty straightforward. The ambiguity would come with when you say immorality, like that could mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So there's not, like, with, if you're going to create commandments or laws for all humanity to follow, it almost definitionally needs to be as specific as possible. You can't say, rule number 1, don't do bad thing. Rule number 2, don't do bad thing in this context. Don't do bad thing in this context. Like, okay, well, what what do you consider bad thing? Like, what do you consider immorality? Um, I would say, don't commit SA. Yeah, that one's a little bit ambiguous, but taken at face value, it's, you know, don't commit adultery. So that's good. Um, we have an interesting one, number 6. Law number 6: don't eat flesh torn from a living animal. So this was a practice, I guess, back in the old times before refrigeration, which was pretty much most of human history. They, if they could not eat an entire animal at one sitting and they don't want it to go to waste, they would separate limbs from the living animal so that the animal would stay alive, suffer horribly, of course, and then you'd have like a leg to feast on for the night or whatever for the next day or so. Um, and the way it's interpreted nowadays, or the way I've heard it rephrased nowadays, is essentially be kind to animals, which I definitely can get behind that. I don't even like killing ants. At work, there's, when I walk to the front doors of the office, there's always like roly polies everywhere, and a lot of them are upside down, struggling. They're kicking their little feet up. So I will bend down if I see them, and flip them back over so that they can walk to safety. Um, and I regard that as kindness to animals. You know, I certainly don't tear off a roly poly leg to eat it while it's still alive. I wait till it's dead first. But yeah, it's interesting that the original law is a specific form of animal torture, um, and the modern interpretation is more generalized. And I found a lot of that when I was reviewing the Ten Commandments too, some of the laws were strangely specific, and I had to sort of reinterpret them through a modern lens to have them be applicable to humanity in general. And the last law, number 7, which is very important, is establish courts of justice. Um, a court of justice is a wonderful invention. I think it's horrible too in a lot of ways, but it's the only way that can fairly look at all sides of an argument, depending on how good your lawyer is and how much money you have, which are, I think, kind of the money part is kind of a perversion of justice. Like rich people get away with doing a lot more than impoverished people. Um, but just the idea that, because before, I believe there were just vigilantism where you didn't even get to hear a side of the story, and a lot of innocent people would lose their lives in that sense. A simple accusation would be all that was needed to condemn a person. And so this law is touting the importance of methodically going through each side of an argument or each side of a case, so we can more accurately determine if somebody deserves punishment or not. Um, Now, there are, of course, kangaroo courts and all kinds of, I mean, there's so many ways around this. So, in a way, this is not specific enough. It's kind of overly generalized, established courts of justice. Like, what is justice? That's for the Sadducees and Pharisees to hash out from the old days. And um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think the Sanhedrin is around anymore. I think they ended a couple thousand years ago or so. But I think I don't know if they're being brought back, but I know there's interpreters of the law nowadays, and I'm sure all of this is hashed out in the Talmud. I've not read the Talmud. Um, I know I was meaning to back when I was a born again Christian. I was going to try to work through the Talmud and learn what the Jewish laws were and how the Levitical laws were spelled out. But yeah, maybe I'll have to do that later. I think that's all that I'm going to say in this episode about the Noahide Laws. Yeah, I appreciate you watching this content. My name is Charlotte, and you're watching The Ugly Atheist. And if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Share this show with somebody you wish to annoy, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.